How Belarus capturing has redrawn Europe's air map. In the week since Ryanair flight FR4978 from Athens to Vilnius was coercively redirected to Minsk, travel in Europe as of now looks altogether different. 3 days after the episode, in which Belarusian warrior jets accompanied the plane to land in the capital referring to security worries. Prior to capturing resistance dissident Roman Protasevich and his Russian partner Sofia Sapka, European carriers were officially halted from flying over Belarusian airspace. The mandate, given Wednesday by the European Union Aviation Safety Agency under the type of a Safety Information Bulletin, approached all carriers with their guideline business environment in one of the EASA part states to stay away from Belarusian airspace. They prompted that any remaining aircrafts ought to do likewise, any place they are based. The order came a day after European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen reported that the coalition was shutting our airspace to planes from Belarus, approaching EU aircrafts not to fly over the country after the silly conduct appeared on Sunday. It's not simply the EU. Other significant transporters including Singapore Airlines have additionally promised to sidestep Belarusian airspace. There were different ramifications. With Russia, a partner of Belarus, requiring a few days to give Air France and Austrian Airlines trips to Moscow the freedom to utilize Russian airspace to redirect around Belarus, inciting cancellations. So how enormous an arrangement is this? Tremendous, say industry insiders, sufficiently large to have effectively shaken the avionics guide of Europe, and adequately large to have thump on impacts past the landmass, especially if the circumstance heightens further. On the off chance that it did, travelers could see their flight times expanded, an ascent in charges across the organizations, and surprisingly long stretch direct flights expecting to make refueling stops en route. Obviously, that is a most dire outcome imaginable. However, coming following a heartbreaking 15 months for flying. As the movement business in Europe prepares for the bustling summer season in the midst of always changing travel limitations and traveler worries about the pandemic, there couldn't be a more regrettable opportunity to add another layer of vulnerability. It'll send butterflies around travelers when they're unsteady on account of COVID, says Paul Charles, a previous overseer of Virgin Atlantic who currently gives emergency conference to carriers as CEO of the PC agency. I figure it influences buyer certainty, particularly in case you're flying in an area close to Belarus, presently that they're not flying over its airspace. That is acceptable. Governments have acted quickly to re-establish certainty, however I think it'll hurl inquiries for purchasers over who they're flying with, which focuses they're flying between and how they're flying between them. In the event that you were flying from Athens to Lithuania, or in the area around Russia, you may reconsider. The reality it's happened that will make individuals begin to address it. The occasions, portrayed by certain administrations as a state-supported commandeering, have definitely redrawn the avionics guide of Europe, says one carrier industry insider, who needed to stay mysterious because of the danger of being distinguished. Be that as it may, the issues don't simply end there, they say. The difficult you have is the test around where you draw the new guide. That entire area has limitations. There are now limitations flying over Ukraine, after the 2014 occurrence where Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 was destroyed. The effect is very critical. No British administrator, including Ryanair, has been flying throughout Crimea for quite a while. And that circumstance may require a long time to determine. So Belarus had seen a tremendous expansion in rush hour gridlock since individuals were circumventing Ukraine. Also, the effect of these workarounds isn't only an issue of coordinations. Redirecting around a nation can mean longer flights, more fuel consumed, offhand visits for refueling, and higher activity costs, including additional group, if the more extended flight time pushes them over their cutoff points, or requires more team. The insider focuses to a British Airways departure from London Heathrow to Islamabad, the day after the first episode. The restriction on Belarusian airspace occurred after it was at that point noticeable all around, and it needed to redirect to Moscow to refuel, prior to proceeding to Heathrow. They were gotten out in light of the fact that they were at that point airborne, yet the test is since it seems Russia might be keeping admittance to some from getting their airspace also. On the off chance that that occurs, it will be another test, they say. Aircrafts will either need to go far north into the polar area, or to go down to the Gulf states, however then most European transporters would try not to fly over Iraq and Iran. Thus, they'd likely go over Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and across India. There's a major piece of airspace which is deliberately critical to aircrafts and is currently being denied them, and there'll be a thump on impact on flight times, cost, and natural effect. In the event that a flight goes from 9 hours to 10, for instance, overall the plane will require 3 pilots rather than 2. Anything longer, it might require much more pilots. There's an enormous expense suggestion, says the insider. Furthermore, they say, while it's probably not going to see an admission climb on influenced courses, if limitations proceed, there could be an overall raising of passages across organizations to consider the higher working expenses. Everybody in the business concurs that if redirections become a drawn-out thing, it'll be a migraine. As CEO of Osprey Flight Solutions, Andrew Nicholson exhorts carriers on flight chances all throughout the planet. He concurs that the thump-on impacts of redirections can be major. Just as the expanded fuel consume and longer flight times, he says, any spontaneous stops can send groups over their apportioned hours. They should be traded out, with another group being flown in. There are huge results to this kind of interruption, he says. In any case, here's the uplifting news. Nicholson doesn't think the circumstance the way things are will cause huge interruption for intercontinental traffic. For trips inside Europe, the disturbance will be moderately greater, however for long-stretch trips there's little danger of interruption. He says, since flight plans are as of now cushioned to take into consideration additional time. He notes, however, that any sort of impromptu disturbance is more unsafe than adhering to plan, regardless of whether that is seeing if the airplane has sufficient fuel. To noticing the discretionary circumstance in the express a plane may redirect to for a refuel. Also COVID-19, no one realizes what might occur if a trip between two nations on corresponding safe records needed to make a pit stop in one with COVID limitations. Nicholson's fundamental concern is less about adding time onto your late spring flight, and more about the guideline in question, which he says can possibly have huge repercussions for us all later on. The principles and guidelines around aircraft security are totally consecrated, he says, and have been cherished in global law since 1944, in the Chicago Convention, which set up opportunity of the skies after the Second World War. This is the first occasion when that a system intended to guarantee the well-being and security of air travel has supposedly been utilized for political closures. Ants likewise stressing that the political reaction to that has additionally been to utilize another component intended to guarantee flight security for political finishes. That is the really stressing viewpoint, he says. In the event that you begin wading into controversy with flight well-being, you're setting out on a dangerous slant, he contends. Aside from whatever else, Russia's activities, not permitting some European transporters to land this week, have been the appearance of a similar issue. I think sustaining the utilization of airspace the board for political finishes is a significant perilous thing for nations to do, not really now. Yet it starts a trend of individuals having the option to do this, he says. Prompting transporters that they shouldn't work in a specific airspace is political for this situation, he thinks. Also, on the off chance that you do that once, any time that happens internationally, at whatever point there's recommendation or preclusions put out regarding airspace, individuals will begin puzzling over whether that is really for security reasons, and that subverts the veracity of the entire framework. Obviously, if it's demonstrated or there's a solid doubt that Belarus misrepresented a security danger to get the plane to land, there should be a political reaction. Yet, there are sanctions that can be set up. Ostensibly the disavowal of Belavia's working permit in the UK is a monetary authorization. You could contend that it is somehow or another a more proper authorization since it's obviously a financial approval. So there's no mixing up utilizing well-being and security as a political instrument. Different assents can be set up which don't make that equivalent disarray between political closures and the support of well-being and security. We should be cautious about utilizing an apparatus intended to guarantee security to additional political finishes, which is the thing that Belarus did in any case, if the charges are demonstrated to be valid. Obviously, some would say that there is truth be told a security danger over Belarusian airspace. Nichols says that, if what's expected to have happened is valid, it's conceivable that the state could refer to additional security dangers to redirect other airplane, to show legitimization. In any case, he demands that playing blow for blow legislative issues with security measures is a perilous street to go down, for future aeronautics. Indeed, he says that irregularity is one of the principal issues confronting flying right now. Carriers watch out for